Just over Memorial Day weekend, there were more than 20 reported mass shootings.
Is America headed for a second civil war?
The national divorce actually separating by red states and blue states.
Does this mark the end of democracy?
We have crossed the Rubicon.
Have we crossed the Rubicon?
Particular blamed the troubles of Rome on foreign invaders. So he built a large and expensive wall.
Is America the new Rome? Republic, civil war, empire. I don't think so, but let's take a look at the fall of the Roman Republic through the eyes of the current American politics and see just how closely these two fates align. Before Augustus was crowned emperor, before Julius Caesar became dictator, and before a civil war, there was trouble, although most wouldn't see it as trouble. Rome has just obliterated Carthage at the end of the on-again, off-again Punic Wars that lasted almost 100 years. But at what cost? At this time, being a Roman soldier was a public duty, but you had to supply your own equipment: sword, shield, helmet, etc. Since only farm owners with a certain amount of land could afford the necessary equipment, they were the ones called upon to fight the war. It's the equivalent of asking small business owners in the US to buy their own rifles and body armor before being drafted into this generation's war. Iraq, Afghanistan, Panama, Vietnam, take your pick. It worked for a while, so what went wrong? What happens if your small business owners are gone for long periods of time at best, or pass away in combat at worst? Those who passed had their farms reclaimed by the government to be rented out on the cheap, while others simply sold their lands. Either way, the wealthy got new land at a discount.
You got a discount?
And farmed that land with an influx of slaves from the war. Those without farms to work headed to the city of Rome to look for jobs. In short, the wealthy gained while the poor suffered. Wait, this sounds familiar. Long drawn-out military campaigns, growing wealth divide. God damn it, we're off to a great start. The question is, what do we do about the divide? Although considering inferior to the patricians, the upper class, the plebeians, the lower class, are still Roman citizens. And besides the right to vote, that means something. What sprang up was a populist leader taking advantage of a bad economy to promote himself as the solution. Not that guy. Damn, this is closer than I was hoping. This guy, Tiberius Gracchus, who rallied the support of the rural plebs. Why does that sound like a slur? Anyway, he gathered the poor rural folk and promised he would fix their problems through legislation, taking the land from the patricians and giving it to the plebs.
Big corporations and super wealthy have to start paying their fair share of taxes. It's long overdue.
Tiberius had his political opponents disposed for standing in the way and had his land reform bill passed. When Tiberius stood for re-election, the patrician was so incensed by this popular politician who continued to break political norms that the patrician rallied a mob to stop what the mob came to believe was a would-be tyrant. The mob killed Tiberius Gracchus in the year 133 BCE, killed for being a populist of the lower class and defying tradition. At least back in present times, anti-Trump protesters are peaceful, thank goodness. Frickin' Antifa. Luckily for the plebeians, Tiberius had a brother, Gaius, who also championed their cause. He tried to rally supporters more than just the rural plebs through the radical reforms like subsidizing grain prices for the flood of poor Romans in the city and trying to give the newly conquered lands to the plebeian farmers. He even tried to decrease corruption by changing the makeup of jurors to mostly the equestrian class. Let's let Homer explain where the equestrian class sits.
It's upper lower middle class type.
Thank you, Mr. Simpson. As with his brother, Gaius's reforms were not popular, which caused protests and anti-protesters. One of these protests caused the death of a rival supporter, whether on purpose or in self-defense is not known. What is known is that because of his death, Gaius Gracchus's rights as a citizen were suspended. Gaius tried to flee but was killed as well in 121 BCE. A populist leader's protest turning violent, causing death. I see you thinking January 6th there. At the time of writing, only protesters have been charged with crimes while Donald Trump is under investigation. Finally, a deviation from the path. Fast forward a bit, and Rome has a new problem. Remember how soldiers were selected from farmers? Well, with less farmers, Rome has a recruitment problem, causing national security concerns. And we're back on the same path. The modern solution is fat camp, while the Roman solution from Gaius Marius in 107 BC is for the general to supply his own soldiers. At the time, this was a fantastic solution, as many plebeians could get work in the army. Rome itself was no longer facing a recruitment problem, and the soldiers were better equipped than when they had to supply themselves. Keep this reform in mind for later, and see if you can spot the problem it causes. Wait, you're telling me that short-term fixes don't solve long-term problems? Like how electric vehicles don't solve the climate crisis? In the year 100 BCE, through assassination and bribery, our hero Gaius Marius was re-elected as consul, or president general, and his political allies were elected to office as well. The allies were trying to change Roman law again like the Gracchi before. The usual here, reduce the price of wheat, and give conquered land to war veterans to farm out for the rest of their days, but this time the extra land would also be given out to non-Roman Italian allies. Now the Romans believed themselves superior, so sharing rights with non-Roman citizens was strongly resented. The assassination was the nail in the coffin though, as you can't have your political rival beaten while the voting is going on. The Allies tried to force the vote through anyway, but the Senate had the election delayed. Again, we break from the Romans, as the US election has never been delayed, not for war, nor during the pandemic. The next day, the Senate declared Marius' allies enemies of the state and forced Marius to round up his people. Marius did so with a group of volunteers and stashed the allies in a Senate building, trying to keep them safe. Now, I am not joking when I say that even though the enemies were captured and the fighting in the streets stopped, some patrician senators climbed the Senate roof and threw tiles down at the allies, killing them. In 91 BCE, a candidate was again assassinated who was pushing for Gracchi-like reforms, sparking a war with Italian allies. 2-game win streak, because politicians are currently physically not hurting other politicians. That doesn't count. Enter a new player, Sulla, who along with Marius wanted to go fight the First Mithridatic War from 89 to 85 BCE, but only one could lead the army. Marius and his ally Cinna tried to pull some political shenanigans that I won't bore you with, but failed so hard both got exiled. Remember how Italian allies were pissed at the Rome for being treated worse than plebeians? Well, as Sulla was off fighting in the east, Cinna pulls some allies together and Marius pulls his veterans together, and they perform a coup d'etat. They plunder the city and eliminate hundreds of enemies. Both Cinna and Marius elect themselves consuls. Not that weird, Rome always had 2 consuls, so that no one man could become a tyrant king. But Marius passes away less than 2 weeks after taking office. Sulla, hearing the news, heads back to Rome with his army. Cinna, now in full control of Rome, is mutinied by his soldiers upon the news Sulla was returning. Sulla takes this opportunity to forcefully take back Rome, aided by the aristocrats, including our future characters in our story, Crassus and Pompey. The Senate first appoints Sulla as dictator in 82 or 81 BCE, a legal position given to the individual to help stop impending doom without the government's red tape. Sulla undoes much of the popular plebeian reforms of the past, taking away the power of the tribune, of the plebs, the most important position for the plebeians to keep the patricians in check. Sulla even changes the jury's makeup back to mostly patricians. The most impactful measure is the prescriptions. A prescription is a list of names, and any person on that list is forfeit their rights as a Roman, their property, and their wealth. Anyone who executes someone on the list gets a slice of their wealth as compensation. Thousands lose everything. While officially the lists were for enemies of Rome, some on the list were just people whose wealth Sulla's allies wanted. Sulla did manage to refill the Roman treasury, though, empty from decades of war. In 80 BCE, he resigns his post as dictator, but is elected consul in the same year. He passes in 78 BC with the quote summing up his life, "No better friend, no worst enemy." This is why it is so important for the Department of Justice to remain apolitical. Although, if you believe some Republicans, the FBI, and the Department of Justice, and social media have all been weaponized against their conservative views. I personally don't agree with this, and I am still waiting for evidence. Can someone tell me what Obamagate is?
Obamagate. It's been going on for a long time. It's been going on from before I even got elected.
What is the crime exactly that you're accusing him of?
You know what the crime is. The crime is very obvious to everybody. All you have to do is read the newspapers, except yours. John, please.
Worthy of note is that Cinna had a son-in-law who should have been prescribed, and was in exile until his family convinced Sulla that no, this man is good. Even in Sulla's memoirs, he writes of his regret for not prescribing this man for fear of the Republic. Quote, "In him there are many Mariuses. That man would go on to form the third of the triumvirate. That man is Julius Caesar." In 59 BCE, 3 men came together to rule Rome because alone there was so much political infighting that no one man could get anything done. Failing me again, America. Congressional deadlock is a real problem that starts making authoritarian strongmen look good. Pompey, having just finished the Third Mithridatic War, wanted land for his men, just like in 71 BC after the Seratonian War. Pompey even threw his money at elections to help get allies in government, but still could not get his land for his veterans. Crassus was trying to champion equestrian rights, or just succumbing to the addiction of power. It's not really clear. Either way, he was trying to renegotiate tax contracts for the farmers in Asia after being devastated by the Third Mithridatic War. Alone, he too could not get the government to work. Julius Caesar is the most interesting, because what everyone wants in the Roman world is a triumph, or a ticker-tape parade for a military win. Caesar is eligible for one for his governorship in Spain, but faces a dilemma. He has to stay outside the city of Rome to negotiate for the triumph by Roman law, and has to be inside the city to be elected consul, where he is favored to win. He asks the Senate for an exception, and they say no, so he forgoes the triumph in order to win the consulship. This is like giving up your sweet 16th birthday, where you know your dad was about to give you that car, to go to Harvard early. Our villain in the story is Cato the Younger, who, despite being the bad guy in the story, is only the villain because he is so incorruptible and beholden to traditional Roman values, like making sure no one man becomes a tyrant king. I can tell you that Trump breaks all kinds of political norms, making him a hero to some, but an enemy to many others. He is not known for being incorruptible, though. As consul, Caesar tries to be very reasonable to get Pompey's land for his veterans. Cato the Elder filibusters Caesar's bill, so Caesar has Cato thrown in jail. This wildly backfires on Caesar, as he just proved Cato's point about Caesar being a would-be tyrant, and why no bill of his should pass. Caesar then brought the bill to the people and begged the other consul, Bibulus, to let the bill pass. Caesar reveals the triumvirate to the public here, and once the bill is vetoed, a riot breaks out because the bill is popular among the people. During the riot, Bibulus has the symbol of consul authority broken, allowing Caesar to pass the bill. Bibulus tries to get the Senate to annul the bill, citing yesterday's riot, but is refused. Cato and Bibulus then boycott the government, allowing the triumvirate to run unabated. No riots to get bills passed in America. Another win. Fast forward 10 years to 49 BCE. Riots, murders, bribes, and delayed elections are now the norm. Caesar has been using bribes to get elected officials to allow his government service, military campaign in Gaul, to continue. Crassus has passed away during a military campaign, leaving the two most powerful men in Rome at odds. Pompey tries to restore order in Rome with force and is granted the role of sole consul, supported by Cato. The Senate votes 370 to 22 for both sides to disarm, but Pompey and Caesar refuse. Many see Caesar as a danger to Rome itself, but don't like Pompey. Two unpopular candidates. How oddly familiar. Caesar wanted a triumph and a consulship, as being a consul would protect him from prosecution. Again, how oddly familiar, wanting a consulship for its immunity. Rome denied him his request, so Caesar brought his army into Roman territory, marking him an enemy of his home state and sparking off a civil war. Here I want to quickly mention how the civil war went. Pompey was betrayed by King Ptolemy of Egypt and beheaded. Caesar still had to run all around Roman territory to pacify resistance against him. From experts I have read, a second American Civil War would look vastly different from the first. It would not be state against state, but more similar to the Ukrainian Revolution in 2014. Caesar enacts various popular reforms, like changing the calendar, before being assassinated for being an autocrat in 44 BCE. This sparks more wars between anti and pro-Caesar groups. When the pro-Caesar group came on top, there was more infighting, till eventually Augustus becomes the first emperor of Rome. So while there is a pattern to the chaos, and we might be in the beginning stages of following the Roman Republic, to the Civil War, to authoritarian state, I don't think we are doomed to follow Rome's lead. The level of violence is not there, thank goodness. And America is not Rome. More importantly, even if I am wrong, American history is still being written, and can change its path. Let me know what you think in the comments below. It's fine. Everything's fine. If you've made it this far, please like, comment, and subscribe. It's fine. Really.